What's up guys, Hamsterville Gaming here with a new video, and welcome to part 2 of gearing up your balanced druids. Today I'm going to show you how to get ready for entry level raids such as AQ20 and Zul'Gurub. The topics that I will cover are talents, gear, stat priority, consumables, add-ons, and then finally rotation. This will probably be a bit of a lengthy video since there's a lot of things to cover, so without further ado, let's get started. Alright, it's time to talk about the spec for our balanced druid. Now, if you've watched my previous video, you might have noticed that I've already talked about the spec. So if you've already seen it, then go ahead and skip to the gear. If you haven't, then please stick around, because right now I'm going to explain to you the PvE balance spec. So here we go. I'm going to start off in the balance tree, naturally. I'm going to start off with improved wrath, which reduces the cast time of your wrath by 0.5 seconds. I really like Wrath because it's a fast spell, and during trash or adds it's really handy. It's not as great in terms of mana usage compared to Starfire, but if you want to get some quick damage out there, then Wrath is definitely great, and a half-second reduced cast time definitely helps. I'm gonna move on to Improved Moonfire. Increases the damage and critical strike chance of your Moonfire spell by 10%. Again, great during adds or trash, and you want to get some quick damage out there. And again, 10% damage and 10% crit is always very nice. I'm going to move on to Natural Shapeshifter. Reduces the mana cost of all shapeshifting by 30%. This is great when you're in Moonkin form, because while you're DPSing you're in Moonkin form, makes a lot of sense. And if you have to heal or you have to innervate on yourself, you have to get out of Moonkin form. And then when you can start doing DPS again, you have to get back into Moonkin form. So having that reduced mana cost on your shapeshifting abilities is definitely great. I'm going to move on to Improved Thorns. Increases damage caused by your Thorn spell by 75%. Some people say, why the hell would you need this? Well, if you've ever raided in WoW Vanilla, then you might have noticed that threat is a big issue here. I mean, compared to Burning Crusade or Retail WoW right now. And you really have to do everything for your tank in order to, so he can build as much threat as you can. And you know, if you're a smart druid, you always buff your tank with thorns, because if he has thorns, he does more damage, which means he creates more threat. And if you have thorns that do even more damage, he creates even more threat. Now, it's still a small, it's still a small improvement of your of the damage of thorns. So it's not really that big of a deal, but looking at the other talents, there's not really something you can put your talent points in apart from this one. This is really aimed for PvE, so we do not need Nature's Grasp, we do not need Omen of Clarity or anything like that. So 3 points in Improved Thorns. Gonna move on to Nature's Reach. Increases the range of Wrath, Entangling Roots, Fairy Fire, Moonfire, Starfire, and Hurricane spells by 20%. Basically a great talent because you want to have as much range between the boss and you, and I think pretty much any other range class has an increased range talent points, so you know you want to stand at the rest of DPS, so you might as well throw 2 talent points in there as well. And move on to Vengeance. Increases the critical strike damage bonus of your Starfire, Moonfire, and Wrath spell by 100%. Basically, if you hit with Starfire for 500 damage, you would crit for 750 without these talent points, and you would crit for 1000 with these talent points. So why would you not take this? It's awesome. Get it. 5 points. Moving on to Improved Starfire. Reduces the cast time of Starfire by 0.5 seconds and has a 15% chance to stun the target for 3 seconds. The stun is pretty useless actually. If you're fighting bosses, they're immune to stun, so it doesn't really do anything. But Starfire is pretty much your main spell, but more on that later in the rotation part of this video. But basically, half a second off your Starfire is really great, so get 5 points in there. Gonna move on to Nature's Grace. Basically, if you land a critical strike with a spell, then your next spell will have a reduced cast time of 0.5 seconds. Again, if you're DPSing and you're using Starfire and you crit, your next Starfire will be 2.5 seconds, so it's a great damage increase. And it's just 1 talent point. Alright, moving on to Moonglow. reduces the mana cost of your Moonfire, Starfire, Wrath, Healing Touch, Regrowth, and Rejuvenation spell by 9%. Basically, your DPS spells cost less mana, you can fight longer, 3 points in there. And Moon Fury increases the damage done by your Starfire, Moonfire, and Wrath spells by 10%. Again, pretty obviously, more damage, 5 points in there. Pretty obvious. And I'm going to move on to the last point in the balance tree, which is Moonkin Form, which basically increases your armor. It will give you a 3% extra crit aura for all spells. And it will also give you a chance to get some mana while you're hitting with your melee staff. You're never going to do this, obviously, but you can with Moonkin Form. But basically, it's all about that 3% extra crit for you and your group. So there you go. We're not going to put anything in the feral tree, so I'm going to skip on right ahead to the restoration tree. I'm going to start off with Improved Mark of the Wild. Increases the effect of your Mark of the Wild and Gift of the Wild spells by 35%. Naturally, if you're raiding, you want to have as much buffs. Mark of the Wild is a pretty good buff, and you want to have more effectiveness, so 5 points in there. Gonna move on to Improved Healing Touch. Now, there might be a time where you have to help out with the healing. This might happen. And if you have 0.5 seconds off your Healing Touch, you mean your Healing Touch spell will become pretty effective, and you can actually do some decent healing with that. So 5 points in there. And then the last talent point, which is probably one of the most important points in the restoration tree, which is Reflection. Allows 50% of your mana regeneration to continue while casting. Basically, it allows mana regeneration while casting. It allows you to fight longer. Again, it's pretty obvious, and it's a great talent. So, there you go. That is the balance spec. It's 38013, as we like to call it. So, let's move on to the gear. Alright, this is going to be a big one. The gear. Now, normally I would give you a pre-raid best in slot list and tell you to get all the gear on there. However, do you need every single item on that best in slot list to get into raids, such as AQ20 and Zul'Gurub? Absolutely not. But your gear needs to be pretty close to that. I mean, I've made a gearing up your elemental shaman for Karazhan, and I did not follow the best in slot list for that as well. I just gave you some good recommendations, which will definitely get you into Karazhan, and you would definitely be able to do some nice DPS. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to recommend you some really nice gear that might not be best in slot, but it will definitely get you into raids, and it will definitely you'll definitely be able to do some really good damage with this gear. So, without further ado, let's get started. So for the headpiece, I'm going to recommend the Spellweaver's Turban. This is actually the best in slot item because it's just so damn good, and I advise every caster to get this. If you're a Moonkin, Warlock, Mage, whatever, get this item. It has 9 intellect, 36 spell damage, and more importantly, that 1% extra chance to hit with spells. Definitely a great item there. The necklace is going to be a tricky one because I have the Yeklik's Opaline Talisman, which has 22 spell damage and 3 mana every 5 seconds. Definitely not bad, but on this item slot I would recommend you to go for Diana's Pearl Necklace. It's this necklace right here I'm showing right now. It's better because it has a bit of stamina, a bit of intellect, but more importantly another 1% extra chance to hit with spells. So that's the item I recommend for the necklace, which also happens to be best in slot. Now, I'm going to move on to the shoulder item. I'm either going to recommend you the Elder Wizard's Mantle, which I'm wearing right now, or the Feral Heart Shoulders. Both are pretty damn good. They offer you a nice bit of intellect and a little bit of spell damage. And I know that this is not best in slot, but trust me, you'll do fine with either one of these items. So that is my recommendation for the shoulder slot. I'm going to move on to the cloak, and I'm going to recommend the Cloak of the Hakari Worshippers. Again, great item, and you might notice that this is actually a drop from Zul'Gurub, and you would be right. However, and this is something I should have maybe said before, But if you're going to gear up your Balanced Druid, I really recommend you to start voting in the vote shop. You can go to the website and then click on vote, and you can vote 6 times a day or 3 times every 12 hours. And this item is only 10 vote points. So if you vote twice a day for 2 days, you have the Cloak. And it's really great. It has 23 spell damage, which is a lot for a blue cloak. So definitely get this one. Start voting and get this item. Alright, I'm going to move on to the chest piece. It's a pretty obvious choice, the Bloodvine Vest. And again, just like the headpiece, I advise every single caster to get this. It's really great. It has 13 intellect, 27 spell damage, and 2% extra hit chance with spells. Alright, gonna move on to the bracers. And I'm gonna recommend the Cenarium bracers. You could also roll with the Feral Heart bracers. I don't know if I have them right here. Yeah, there we go. They are a little bit worse, but they are much easier to obtain. However, I managed to pick these up for an absolute bargain, and they're pretty good at what they do. They have a little bit of spell damage and a fair amount of intellect, stamina, spirit. So I think they're definitely a good choice for a an entry-level rating Balanced Druid. Gonna move on to the staff, the Zulian Ceremonial Staff. Again, this is an auction house item. You can it has 32 spell damage, 16 intellect, and 13 stamina. I think I've recommended this before in my gearing up your Clothy video because it is just so damn good. It's only like 150 to 200 gold in the auction house, so it's not that expensive, and it offers you some great extra spell damage. So pick this up while you can. Moving on to the Idol of the Moon. Pretty much the only thing you can get right now pre-raid on your Balanced Druids. It increases your damage done by your Moonfire spell by 70%. You're not going to use Moonfire that often, apart from trash or anything. But still, 70% extra damage, why not? Just get it from the auction house. Alright, gonna move on to the trinkets. I'm gonna start off with the Eye of the Beast. This is obtained through a quest, but you can also obtain it through the vote point shop again. It's only 10 vote points. So again, a very cheap item, and it offers you 2% extra crit chance with spells. I'm going to move on to the Briarwood Reach, which is the second trinket. This is actually best in slot, and I think the Eye of the Beast is best in slot as well, by the way. It offers you 29 extra spell damage and healing. That's really nice for a trinket, and this drops in UBRS. Alright, moving on to the rings. There's many items to choose from, and the 2 rings that you should be getting, or at least that are best in slot, are the Dom Mauricio's Band of Domination and Rune Band of Wizardry. However, I do think that these items are really hard to obtain, because pretty much any caster that wants to run these dungeons are going for those rings. So it's very time consuming to get these. So what I done is I actually picked up a Maiden Circle for 400 gold. And yes, that is expensive, but again, I've said this before and I'll say it again, it's the nature of vanilla. Good stuff is just expensive. Deal with it. So there you go, that's what I've done. And the second ring is Zanzil's Seal. Again, this is something that drops in Zul'Gurub, but you can get this through voting. It is 36 vote points, so it is quite expensive, but it's really great. It has 10 stam, 10 intellect, 1% extra hit chance with spells, and 11 spell damage. So, great ring. Get this while you can. Moving on to the boots. Bloodvine boots, that's right, another Bloodvine item. 16 intellect, 19 spell damage, and 1% chance to hit with spells. Again, pretty obvious choice. Bloodvine, it's the go-to item for casters, as well as the leggings, which I'm going to talk about right now. 6 intellects, again 1% chance to hit, and 37 spell damage. That is so much for blue pants. Just get it. You will not regret it. They are very expensive. I mean, the full set is about 1.2k or something like that. But it's worth it. Trust me. If you're going to want to run pugs, and you basically go to some guy that's organizing it, you poke him and he inspects you, and if he sees that full Bloodvine set, he will probably invite you pretty quickly. So definitely get these 3 Bloodvine items. They're really great. They're absolutely mandatory for a beginning raider. Moving on to the belt. I'm going to give you two options here. First of all, the Cenarian belt. I really like this item because it has 22 intellect. And, you know, us druids, we don't have a large mana pool. I mean, a mage has a lot more mana on level 60 than a druid. So we really need a lot of mana to get ourselves a big mana pool. So 22 intellect, really great. 4 mana every 5 seconds and a little bit of spell damage, 9 spell damage, so really great. And the second choice is another WoW point item that you can get for just 18 WoW points. That's quite cheap. That is the Belt of Untapped Power, which has 6 stamina, 7 intellect and 29 spell damage. So I have both, and it really comes down to what fight I'm having. If I need a little bit more mana, I'm going to use the Cenarian Belt. If the fight is over pretty fast and I just want to do a lot of DPS, I'm going to use the Belt of Untapped Power. And the last item is another WoW point item. It's the Blood Tinct Gloves. I am going to give you a second option though, because these are, again, best in slot. They're great. They're pretty expensive. I think there are 34 WoW points on the WoW shop. However, you can also get Earth Waters Gloves, the one that I actually recommended in my first one. They can actually last you through these entry level raids. They're fine. They don't have any hit, but they have a decent amount of spell damage. And I've seen many beginning raiders in AQ20 and such wearing these gloves, so those are just fine too. But if you want to have just a little bit more fancy gear, then you can gather up some WoW points and get the Blood Tinct Gloves, because these are amazing. 10 intellect, 10 stamina, 10 spirit, 19 spell damage and 1 spell hits. So there you go, that is the gear that I would recommend you to get as a balanced druid. It's not exactly best in slot for some items, but I don't think you need every single best in slot item on that best in slot list. So what does this gear give me? Well, let's check it out. I'm gonna skip over the strength and agility, that's pointless. It'll give me, with the Mark of the Wild buff by the way, it will give me 78 stamina, 165 intellect, 55 spirits, a bit of armor, who cares. And this is the most important part. It will give me 299 spell damage, 4% crits, 7 mana regeneration every 5 seconds, and 7% hits with spells. So that is really nice for an entry level raiding balanced druid. So there we go. I think we're ready to move on to the next part. So that is the gear done. Alright, now that we're spec'd in the right way and we got the gear, it's time to talk about stat priority, because you basically want to know what stats you want to be focusing on when you're starting to replace gear and such. So, just like any other caster, your first job will be to focus on spell hits. More importantly, 16% spell hit. Now, will you ever get to that 16% spell hit in entry level raids? No, you won't. But it is your job to keep on focusing on that spell hit and to get as close as possible to that 16%. I mean, to actually reach that spell cap, you're gonna need about, you're gonna need items such as Neltharion's Tear from Nefarian and such, but those are pretty OP items. But as you're leveling as you're making your way through these raids and you're gearing up, try to focus on spell hit as much as you can. After that, you're gonna start focusing on crits. Crit is a huge damage buff to Moonkin, since, well, crits do more damage obviously, and it allows you to activate Nature's Grace, which means your next spell will become half a second faster, and if you can keep that buff up as long as possible, you'll be able to do a lot of spells with half a second time off. So that's definitely something you should be focusing on after spell hits. After that, you'll be focusing on spell damage. Basically on more spell damage, more damage to your spells, bigger DPS, doesn't really need as much explanation there. And after that is going to be intellect, because as I just stated, druids do not have a huge mana pool, so we will go out of mana much faster than compared to a mage. So, also try to focus on intellect a lot. Then we're going to focus on MP5, again because we lack a giant mana pool and we have to have mana every 5 seconds to keep us, for us to be able to fight a lot longer. And then you're going to focus on spirits because, because of the talent point that I just talked about in the restoration tree. More spirit means more of your mana regeneration will be able to continue while casting, which means you'll fight longer. There's one more thing I want to add though, and that is for the crits. Now I just talked about that crits being so damn important, because if you reach spell hit, you want to go for spell crits. And there's a few ways you can actually get a little bit more crits. First of all, you should get the full Bloodvine set, as I just said. And once you've done so, train up your tailoring. That's right, I have a balance rate right here. My tailoring is 300. And what that gives me is an extra 2% crits from that Bloodvine set. So not only does it give me 4% hit in total, it will also give me 2% extra crit. So that's definitely a huge tip for all you balance druids out there. Train your tailoring to 300. It's fast, it's kind of cheap, it doesn't take a lot of time, and it gives you 2% extra crit. So definitely do that. So in a nutshell, 60% hit, then crits, then spell damage, then intellect, then mana for 5 seconds, and then spirits. So that is the stat priority you want to focus on. So let's move on to consumables. Alright, we got the right spec, we got the right gear, and we know what stats to focus on. Now, you could join a pickup group for AQ20 or Zoo group right now. You could whisper a guy and say, I want to go there, and they'll probably give you an invite. Should you go there right now? No. Because we're going to talk about a bunch of consumables first. Now, I do not think that you need a bunch of flasks of supreme power to do AQ20. You do not need to drop hundreds and hundreds of gold into consumables for these entry-level raids. However, there are some very cheap ways to improve your damage and, just improve your overall DPS. So, the first tip I'm going to give you is always, before a raid, always get the Darkmoon Fair buff. Because this, I'm going to talk to the fortune teller right here, Sage, and you're going to choose the first option, Slay the Man. And again, the first option, Execute your friend painfully. And there we go. And he will give us a 2-hour buff, which increases my damage done by 10%. That's right, 10% damage for 2 hours. Now, unfortunately, if you die, this buff will be removed. And that will be pretty much the end. But before, it's a really great buff. And until you die, you'll be doing 10% more damage. So that is a huge increase. So definitely get that as a starter. So what else should you get before joining a raid? Well, I'm going to show you my bags now, so you can get a pretty much an impression of what my bags look like when I go to a raid. There you go. So first of all, I have in my first backpack 4 stacks of Wild Thorn roots. Mandatory. Get these, please. Get the Gift of the Wild spell and get a boatload of Wild Thorn roots. You do not want to buff every single party member 20 times every half hour. Trust me, it's very slow. People are waiting on you. You have to drink 4 times. Just get the Gift of the Wild and get the Thorn root. Then I got 4 stacks of Morning Glory Dew. It's not really necessary. Usually a mage that can help you out. And then more importantly, in this bag I have some consumables right here. I'm going to start off with the Wizard Oil. 24 spell damage. Lasts 30 minutes. And it does not disappear when you die. Very handy. Then we're going to move on to the Arcane Elixir, which increases spell damage done by 20 for 30 minutes. And I usually have 4 stacks of Wizard Oil and 3 or 4 stacks of Arcane Elixirs. I just happen to have one greater Arcane Elixir that I still had from my mage. But usually 4 stacks of Arcane Elixirs and 4 stacks of Wizard Oil. I advise you to get these 2 items as well. The third item I have in my bag are Greater Mana Potions. Now, the best potion you can get are the Major Mana Potions, the level 49 potions, and they will restore you a lot of mana. However, these are very expensive. I mean, a stack of 5 of these is around 50 gold in the auction house. Do I need that kind of mana potions for a raid, such as AQ20? No, I do not. I mean, I've done Assyrian, and all I had to use was one of these mana potions, and that was enough. Maybe two max. But you do not need those level 49 potions. So, basically, bunch of Thorn Root for the Gift of Wild buff, Wizard Oil for 24 spell damage, Arcane Elixir for 20 spell damage, and a few greater mana potions. So let's let's enchant my weapon. And there we go. And drink the Arcane Elixir. And right now, it doesn't take the Arcane Elixir into consideration, but with the Arcane Elixir I have 343 spell damage, which is really nice for an entry-level raider. So there you go, those are the consumables that I advise you to get. The Thorn Root, Wizard Oil, Arcane Elixir, and the Greater Mana Potion, and always the Dark Moon Fair buff before you start raiding. So yeah, there we go. On to the next topic. Alright, time to talk about add-ons. This segment is going to be pretty short because there's only 3 add-ons I recommend you get, and all the others are pretty much optional. The first one is KLH Threat Meter. Very important, as you know, and as I've stated before, threat is a big issue in World of Warcraft Vanilla. So you want to keep an eye on your threats, and with this add-on you can really check out your threat while you're DPSing. So definitely get that. The second one is Recap. It's basically the recount of WoW Vanilla. It shows your damage done, it shows other people's damage done, and you know, it's a great add-on to keep track of your DPS, so also get that. And the third one is Bigwigs. It's basically a sort of deadly boss mods add-on, which tells you, boss timers and a few other options. So again, it's really handy for bosses, and I think it's mandatory you get that. So those are the 3 crucial add-ons for raiding. There's 2 other add-ons I would recommend to you, which are optional, and those are the Atlas Loot and Atlas. Atlas Loot basically shows you the loot table of every boss in WoW Vanilla, so you can kind of check out what gear would drop should you if you're at a certain boss. And Atlas shows you the maps of all the raids, so you can anticipate what the raid looks like, what bosses are there, and what boss is up next if you're killing trash. So those are the add-ons that you can get, and there's also a ton of other add-ons to get on the for the Phoenix WoW 1.12 server. And there is a thread on the Phoenix forum. I think it's called, let me check, the 1.12.1 add-ons by Sulfurus. I'll put that in the video description below. I'll put a link there so you can check out all the other add-ons you can download. But the first 3 add-ons I've recommended, please download those. It's mandatory you get those. So that's pretty much it for the add-ons. So now we're going to talk about the rotation. Alright, time for the last point, the DPS rotation. And just like the add-ons, it's going to be very simple. Basically what you're going to do is you're going to keep Fairy Fire up and cast Starfire. And that's the entire DPS rotation. If you're dealing with trash or adds, you can use Wrath and Moonfire, but basically during boss fights you're gonna just spam Starfire and keep Fairy Fire up because it decreases the boss's armor and it's great for melee DPS. Now, as you can see, I got the Dark Moon Fair buff, I got my Arcane Elixir, and I got my Wizard Oil, and I got one of my noob accounts right here, one of my noob priests. And there's no target dummies in WoW Vanilla, which kind of sucks. And there's no real mobs or anything that are just basically walking around where you can test out your DPS. So I'm going to have to resort to using my priest and basically heal myself while I'm doing DPS with Starfire, and hope I can do a decent DPS reading that way. Because really there's no other way to test out your DPS apart from actually joining raids. So let's see what kind of DPS we can do. Right, here we go. Let's see how much DPS we can do. So I'm basically going to spam Starfire and I'm going to spam Flash Heal on my Priest. Ooh, there we go. 2k crit. Ooh, another one. 2k crit. So as you can see, a a bit more than 1k hit with Starfire and 2k crits with Starfire. That's really nice. And a little bit of Starfire stun there. Hope I can keep my priest alive. He has like next to no HP, so... But it's okay, we can do some damage right now. Boom! There we go, 2056. And I got 411 DPS. Now, I did get a lot of crits. And I have to go out of Moonkin form and cast Innervate, so I'll lose a bit of DPS. But still, I think it's safe to say we can do an average of 350 to 400 DPS on bosses. So, yeah, that's the kind of DPS you can expect in this stage. And that is the end of this video. That concludes episode 2 of Gearing Up Your Balanced Druid, getting ready for raids. I hope I was able to teach you guys a few things about the Balanced Druid in terms of gear, talent, rotation, etc, etc. And if you plan on going balanced in PvE, then that's awesome. I wish you all the best of luck. And be sure to represent all the Moonkins out there. So, as always, thanks for watching this video. I'm Hamzul Gaming, and have a good one.